Everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. Come and eat. Listen diligently to me, and eat what is good, and let your soul delight.
Let's go back to the Torah, Genesis 44. Maybe we can hit a few high points here. Dr. Joe, is there anything on your heart that you wanted to bring out from this? Something sure is smelling good in that kitchen. I don't know what that is, but seriously. So this week was what I say, Vayira, or Vayigash. Vayigash is the Hebrew name for this parasha, and it starts in chapter 44, verse 18. Judah intercedes for Benjamin. Oh my, this is a picture of Yeshua. This is a huge picture of Yeshua. I mean, that is probably the big one in this one. And Joseph revealing himself to his brothers. If we could bring an Ephraim into this, I mean, I've written a lot about this. Why don't I give you an opportunity to take a shot at that? Are you?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, go for it. I mean, you've been hearing me talk for a while.
Well, I mean, I think that's the beautiful, this future fulfillment, that you've got one of the brothers that looks very much, he's all Gentile looking.
Yeah, well, no, his children are half Egyptian.
Right.
And he looks Egyptian.
And, you know, the people who put together the Haftorah portions, when they couldn't read, you know, when we were just studying about Hanukkah, the reason the one they connected with this portion is Ezekiel 37 about the two sticks coming
That's
together.
right, absolutely.
So they had an understanding. I don't think they saw to its fullest extent of who that Ephraim was, but us, because we're Joseph.
Review the prophecy of the two sticks of Ezekiel 37.
Sure.
Just for this video, I want to get that on there.
Okay.
Well,
so Ezekiel 37 is all about the two sticks coming back together, where he has them put a stick, he says, right on one of them.
Yoval to Ezekiel.
To Ezekiel, and he says, right on one Ephraim and all his companions, and right on the other stick, Judah and his companions. And he says, put them together and they're going to become one in your hand. And so that prophecy is about a future fulfillment. I believe it's after the resurrection, but
the process started with Yeshua.
Yes.
Yeah, but the
process.
But the fulfillment of it, really, in the full sense, will be happening after his second coming.
Because I don't think. Yeah, it's definitely not completely fulfilled yet, because we're still separate houses. There's
and David's not ruling over us.
We're butting heads together. Yeah. If you try to get us together, we tend to butt heads. We're not in unity yet. When Messiah
loosely speaking, the Christians and the Jews.
Exactly.
Yehuda and Ephraim.
That's a
loose
good way to
sense
look
of the
at
word.
that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And David isn't ruling over us, and that Ezekiel 37 prophecy says that David will be ruling over, and then Yehovah Elohim will be over all that, and that's not going to happen until David is resurrected. He's dead and buried with us, as it says in the book of Acts.
Right. Exactly. So
the Jewish sages, when they were putting the Haftorahs together during the intertestamental period, actually during the time of the Maccabees, they had a sense of that, and they connected the Haftorah portion, which includes Ezekiel 37, with this particular Torah portion, which already existed, because they recognized that what is going on here with Judah and the other sons coming into recognition of Joseph was a prophetic antitype or prototype of a future event.
Absolutely. And that's beautiful. I think they were divinely inspired to do that, because you notice he was in the room with them and everything, and they still didn't recognize their brother, because he had looked so Gentile. And it's just the same with us. Judah can't recognize us believers. We're worshiping the same God as they're worshiping, but they don't recognize that we're brothers yet.
Well, especially those that are in the church,
right?
Where they got Christmas trees and they're eating swine, and they're not keeping the Sabbath, and they're keeping false paganized holidays. And they got this Jesus person that supposedly came to do it with the Torah, and looks Greco-Roman, and a lot of Jews don't even realize that they've never read the New Testament. They don't realize that Jesus was actually a Jewish rabbi, Orthodox, and he did not come to do away with the Torah. But in Christianity, there's this caricaturized, westernized, Catholicized view of who Jesus is, And no, very few Jews will accept that.
Would be attracted to that or anything. It would just be.
Whereas we have come back to the more Jewish Yeshua and let go of the pagan trappings, or are trying to, and that's a Yeshua that would be more palatable to our Orthodox Jewish brethren, although they're having a hard time with accepting his deity, and they have blindness just like the church has had blindness, and Elohim will remove that blindness so when he comes, so that they can recognize his deity, although there are many Jews that have converted and accepted the deity of Yeshua and gotten saved. Hallelujah. Starting from the 12 apostles in the early church on.
Well, it's like you're fond of saying, the blindness in part has happened in both houses of Israel. The Christians can't see the written Torah, and the Jews can't see the living Torah. So both houses are blinded.
We're putting it all together.
Yes.
The living and the written Torah, they're two sides of the same coin. And that's why the slogan of our ministry that I have on YouTube is connecting the gospel, message of the gospel with the pro-Torah Hebrew roots of our faith, which is the Torah and the rest of the Old Testament. Let's connect them together and present the whole picture from Genesis to Revelation.
Yeah. And so when that time is right, at his return and under his guidance, we'll be able to one day probably say, Ani Yosef, I am Joseph, and then their eyes will be open and they'll really, just embrace. But then we'll be unity, all one house again, not divided any longer. It'll just be the house of Israel, his beloved. So right now we're just a divided people. So that's just beautiful.
Well, and let me just, if I can find a place in my notes here, I guess it's in chapter 44. Let's review real quickly some of these things. I'm looking at my Torah commentaries, and I have this under Genesis 44, verse 18, which is the beginning. That's what Vayira means, and he came near. I believe it's or something to that gist. But what is the spiritual prophetic significance of Judah initiating this approaching to Joseph? Well, remember who the descendants of Judah were. Well, they became the southern kingdom of Israel, and Joseph, his descendants, Ephraim, Manasseh, became the northern kingdom. Well, they were the lead tribes of the northern 10 tribes, and Manasseh, or Ephraim, was the lead tribe. In fact, he was the firstborn. He was given the birthright, and Judah was given the kingship. And so, and of course we know then that the descendant of Judah was the lion of the tribe of Judah. That's Yeshua the Messiah. And so the descendants of Judah, in this sense, we see that when Judah is coming near, he didn't recognize Joseph. So, okay, we have a couple of double entendre going on here. Judah, as representing his descendants, or the Jews, did not recognize Joseph, who looked like an Egyptian. And as it says in the book of Hosea and other places, the 10 tribes went into a captivity and were scattered around the whole earth, and they looked like Gentiles, and they became like the beasts of the field, and using those terminologies. And as, like Dr. Joe was saying, the Jews don't recognize that these are their brothers. Well, a few of them are beginning to, but it's a slow process. So Judah did not recognize Joseph. It wasn't until Joseph started speaking in perfect Hebrew, flawless, no accent. And some people, and this is just hearsay, we don't know, but it's very possible, when Joseph told the others, the Egyptians, to leave the room, if Joseph would have started speaking Hebrew, and then if he would have shown them, his brothers, that he was circumcised, I'm sure they were like, yeah, you're Joseph, all right. Because the Egyptians did not circumcise. The heathens did not circumcise. And so, and of course, that was a wonderful, happy family reunion. But at the same time,
embraced them,
they wept. Yeah. And that day is coming.
Yeah.
That day is coming. Right now, you can't go back to the land of Israel. The land of Israel is an inheritance for all the tribes, not just Judah. But you can't, as a Christian or a believer in Yeshua, you cannot immigrate there. You can stay for 2 months on a tourist visa and then you're out of there. Unless you're a student. And they don't want, they'll let Buddhists and anybody else that's Jewish come in, but they will not let believers in Yeshua. Except under very difficult circumstances or stringent requirements. The door is not open yet. There's blindness. Now, so this is, Judah is a picture of that. The blindness on the Jews, the modern Jews, from seeing, I'm speaking broadly. But he is also a picture of, Judah was a picture of Yeshua also, where he was gathering the tribes together. And I know Judah didn't initially understand that. But both, we see an interplay here between the two Yeshuas. The two Yeshuas. When I say two Yeshuas, don't be scandalized. The Jewish sages recognized there were going to be two Messiahs. They didn't know if it would be the same person or it would be two separate ones. We know it's the same one. But there would be one that would come that was going to be the suffering servant. And he would be like Joseph. And Joseph was a prototype of that. The other one would be, and they called him Mashiach ben Yosef. The other one was going to be like David. Mashiach ben David. Now we recognize that that's speaking of the two comings of Yeshua. The first time he came as a suffering servant to lay his life down as a lamb. The second time he's coming as a conquering king to defeat Babylon the Great and all of that stuff. Blessings. Talk to you later. Good to see you. Take care. Shalom.
And interestingly, look at what his name. He was Messiah ben Yosef. His
son of Joseph.
Earthly daddy's name happened to be Joseph, and yet they wrote about this before his coming. These. I mean, some of these writings are later, but when they look through, it was right there before their eyes if they would have just been paying attention.
And now they didn't want the suffering servant.
Right.
Remember the last question the disciples asked him before he ascended, will you at this time restore the kingdom? They didn't you're not going to die. We don't want you to die. No. Peter says, no, I'm going to prevent you. Took out a sword and everything. They wanted somebody to come and throw off the yoke of tyranny of Rome. Yeah. I mean, look, who wants to put their faith in a Messiah that's going to die and leave us in this place? But they didn't realize that Isaiah 53 had to be fulfilled. They had to be set free from the yoke of sin first. What good is it to be free from physical bondage of Rome in this case if you're not freed from spiritual bondage of sin, of death, hell, and the grave, of Satan,
right,
and the world and all that. In the world, the flesh, and the devil, I mean to say. Eventually, death, hell, and the grave. So that's the tyranny we had to get set free from first, so that then when he comes back, the second time, he can bring a kingdom, and there will be people who have overcome the world of flesh and devil who will be able to rule and reign with him, and we won't have mayhem again and a fallen world in a perfect kingdom. So it had to be in that order. And so we see Judah and Joseph, this interplay between these two messiahs. And I'm not going to go into it, but I've posted it's in my Torah commentaries, and it's on my blog, about 50 some examples of how Joseph in incredible ways prefigures Yeshua. I mean, he was sold for 30 shekels of silver, or it wasn't 30, I think Joseph was 20, but I mean, and Judah betrayed him, Judas betrayed Yeshua, and we go on and on and on. But then in this chapter 44, Judah is a picture of Yeshua. I'll give you some examples. Both sought to please their fathers. Judah was doing this. He was willing to give himself as a ransom because he saw how broken Jacob was to let go of Benjamin. So he was willing to lay his own life down for his father. Well, Yeshua did the same thing. I haven't come to do my own will, but my Father's will, and he laid his life down. Both acted out of unconditional love for their younger brother. Judah for Benjamin, and Yeshua for us, our younger brother. Both stood to gain nothing personally, but rather stood to lose much. If their plan did not work, Judah would become a slave of Benjamin, of Joseph in Egypt. And Yeshua would become a slave to death and hell and to Satan if he sinned. I mean, I don't know what that would have done to the Godhead. And as Matthew Henry, the Christian commentator, points out, I like Matthew Henry. He's not pro-Torah, but in his devotional commentary, he's so focused on Yeshua that you can read his commentary, and he takes everything in the Torah and he points it to Yeshua. And he does a really great job of it. And in this case, he points out about Judah's love for Benjamin, to the point that Benjamin never separated from Judah, because Judah was willing to lay his life down for Benjamin because of his love for Jacob. The tribe of Benjamin never separated from Judah.
Look at the tribal inheritance.
Tribal inheritance. And Benjamin made his inheritance right there. In fact, I think Jerusalem was in the tribe of Benjamin, the city of Jerusalem. I mean, it was right there. And Benjamin was absorbed into Judah. Paul was in the tribe of Benjamin. They stayed very low. And what do we learn from that? What we do affects the future generations. If there's a great outpouring of love, and there's a great love between siblings or parents or whatever, that can be passed on down generationally, even for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Anyway, there's more we could say, but this is a great, I mean, he was willing to become surety for the lad in 42 verses 32 and 34. He's willing to lay his life down as a ransom, and that's a picture of Yeshua for us. Beautiful, beautiful love story. These two families coming together, and Judah taking the initiation to make it happen. After he was the one that initially suggested to sell. I don't think that's the front door. That's some kid banging on something. I can tell why. So anyway, beautiful picture here. Beautiful picture. Joseph, Dr. Joe, anything else you want to? We got a few more minutes, but I mean, if you want to know more about that, go read in the my commentaries online. It's all there. Well, not all of it, but some of it. And also go read the blog that I posted. I don't have time to get into there, but this week I posted on the blog, my blog about the final redemption. And anyway, we talk about that on there.
Well, one or two other things in this portion. In the next little bit there, it talks about the 70 that went down to Egypt. And remember that he said, I'm going to divide the people of the earth according to the people of Israel. So that 70, it just ties in again that he made 70 Israelites to be a witness to the 70 nations. So
remember there were 70 nations mentioned in
Genesis 10 there.
Genesis 10. 70 is a significant number. So and the 70 went down into Egypt, a picture of the 70, which is 7 times 10. There's numerical significance there, and then
look at our namesake, Elim. There were 12 springs of water for the 70 trees there.
And that's a picture of the 70 disciples or elders that Yeshua chose. And the 12 wells of water would be like the tribes of Israel who were to go to the nations. They didn't do it though. They went sideways on Elohim, but they were to be a witness to the nations, a light to the nations, as Deuteronomy says. And then the 12 apostles, who were to be the kings over the 12 tribes, then they did go to the nations and turn the world upside down. So basically when Yeshua came back, he appointed 70 to do what the original 70 failed to do. And of course there were 70 elders that Moses appointed over to rule over Israel, and that was a judicial
Like the
system.
Sanhedrin, yeah.
The Sanhedrin was followed after. There were 70 elders, and they were to be rulers in Israel, and judicial system or ruler system. You see the 70 as being rulers, as being evangelists, and of helping to gather the nations and rule the nations of the 70 nations.
Amen.
So it's a beautiful, beautiful picture here. Yeah, the theme carries through all the way to the very to the end of the New Testament.
And then lastly in this portion, the talk about the famine and why everybody's going to come. In each of the forefathers' generations, there was a time of famine. And I think this is a future prophetic significance. Amos says that there will be a time of famine, not for bread and water and everything, but a famine for the hearing of the word of Yah. But Abraham, he went down to Egypt during his famine. Isaac went to the Philistines with Abimelech there, and Jacob here is going to have to go down into Egypt too, and all of them went down. So they went down to the pagan nations. They've sold themselves out to some pagan nation somewhere. I see our country, America, doing the same thing, because we were started as a godly nation, and we're getting so poor and so poor. We're selling ourselves to China now as a nation, and you look at all the things like, so that it gets so bad, then they're like, well, you can buy this from us, and then this, and little by little, Joseph, for Pharaoh's sake. But first they buy them, then they buy they're the land, then they buy them, and eventually, and the taxes get so high, the people are then having to...
High taxes are only 20%.
Well, right, now they're much higher. But they weren't, so, eventually they became slaves. This is the partial, the little by little servitude and slavery
is coming on.
That happens.
Yeah.
So I see a future significance that all of us are going to, our nations are going to all be into a place of servitude.
And that's what we see in the book of Revelation, Babylon the Great.
Yeah.
We see it says that the merchants are the great men of the earth. And Revelation 13 talks about the three aspects of Babylon the Great: political, economic, and religious. And that they're going to make slaves out of men, and we're going to have an oligarchic, you're going to have a one world government, which we really have, or it's coming into fruition. And you're going to have the merchants, or the large corporations, are going to be the ones in bed with the government that are controlling everything. And you're going to have basically a feudalistic system. Instead of nobility, you're going to have the government officials and the corporate oligarchs ruling over the people who are their serfs, their worker bees. And that's why they're going to be weeping. They're going to trade in the souls of men. That's a whole other thing, human trafficking and all that. That's the system we're moving toward. And some countries are pretty much in that to one degree or another. And I believe that's why the powers that be are trying to bring this nation down economically, politically, militarily, to make it into this system which fits, is very copacetic with Revelation 18, Babylon the Great, which is what Yeshua is going to destroy when he comes back, and then the captives will be set free, spiritually, physically, and economically, to return in a highway that's made in the wilderness, his people, and that will correspond with his establishment of his kingdom on this earth for 1,000 years, and which is a precursor to the new heavens and the new earth, the new Jerusalem, heaven on earth.
Mm-hmm. So and when I'm looking at this, you're bringing to mind, it was Joseph here that saw what was going to happen. When he foretold Pharaoh's dream, that Joseph saw it coming, the famine and everything. Well, we're the Joseph in the story. Our eschatology, end time event, Christians have a much better sense than Judah does of end time events. Yeah. So we're much more in tune with understanding. We've got hard times coming here, folks. And
remember what Joseph's Egyptian name was? Zephnath, or whatever.
Easy for you to say.
Anyway, but it means revealer of dreams. That's right. What they need. And so that's a good point. I never thought about that. Christians have a much better handle on eschatology. Now the Jewish sages have an understanding of eschatology. I've studied out a little bit, but
they do.
It's not as definitely they don't understand the fall feast days prophetically, not anywhere like what we have an understanding of.
And look at how many Christian folks today are driven to prepare and set aside stores and everything to prepare for these hard times coming. So Joseph may be the savior of his brothers in the future.
And that's a good point.
Being able to provide for his Jewish brothers and things. I don't know. I mean,
It's
a little
interesting.
supposition there, but
Even during
it
World
may
War
happen
II,
again.
there
Yeah.
were many European Christians that brought. I mean, we all think of what's her name, Corrie ten Boom, who brought Jews into their house, but there were others too. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer tried to save them, and so on. And they were, you know, there you go.
So that may be re-fulfilled again in our days.
Absolutely. Any questions, any comments or reflections or anything on what we've said? We've covered a lot of territory. I hope you guys enjoyed that.
Wonderful.
But any questions or comments? Some of the people had to go, but before it's right just a little bit before 6:30, so we're doing really well here. Yes, Heidi.
I just, in the portion we read in 1 Samuel.
Oh yeah.
And I wanted to go there too.
Yeah, let's
There's
take
two
that
good-
bit. Well, let's
real
go
quick.
there. Let's go to 1 Samuel.
I just, you know, people, they'll say that, oh, you read that Old Testament and it's so boring and stuff, and it just, I've read this before, but the part there in 1 Samuel 29 where, you know, David, King Achish is going to take David to help fight with the Philistines, and his generals are really angry about it, and they're basically, it just, when Joe and I read that, it made me laugh, because they're like, you're kidding, right? You know, isn't this the guy? Haven't you heard the song? You know,
The song they wrote about him.
Didn't he
Saul
kill-
killed his thousands, David his tens of thousands.
What about? Yeah, didn't he kill some Philistines in order to, you know, as a dowry for Saul's
The whole
daughter?
time he's living with him, he's going out on these little raids and coming back with stuff. He's not even telling them. He's like, man, he wiped out every man, woman, and child in that village, and
Yeah, but
The whole
it
time
just,
Elohim sent a major spirit of blindness on the Philistines.
yeah, and then the king's like, he comes to David, and he's like, you know, I really like you, but these guys are worried about me having you fight for us, you know, and David's like,
David was almost in a pickle there.
he's like, but what have I done?
Yeah, he's talking about
what did I do?
Yeah. So, but it's just funny
smooth operator.
that verse about, you know, this is the guy, you know, Saul has killed his thousands. David,
Hello.
you know, yeah. So I just,
And it's almost
That
like
is a very comical.
Achish says, well, he's like it's like the eyes of an angel of God. He's like, David's a little angel. What do you know? Yeah, they only knew because every chance he was getting out and wiping out towns around there.
Yeah.
But they never told him where he was getting the stuff.
Now with with GPS and satellites and Google Earth and all that, I mean, there's no way you could pull that stunt today. Drones and whatever, spy this and that. Just goes to show how far we've come since these days.
Well, so in this portion of reading in 1 Samuel, I was looking for end time events. One thing I bring up about Yah's anointed. David still recognized that Saul was one of Yah's anointed, and he wouldn't lay a hand on him. A lot of times we forget that Yah has a purpose for some of his servants here, and sometimes we want to just attack folks, but it's important to realize, wait a minute, if I speak against that man, that's one of Yah's anointed. Even if they're going astray, we have to have that fear that David had. But
Well, I see Saul as representing, in a sense, the church system. It's a mixture, and it's Babylon that Elohim is telling us to come out of. I mean, Babylon, religiously, is a worldwide system, but the church is feeding, and I'm talking about the Constantine. You know, that comes from that, is feeding both from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. They've mixed paganism into their, but they're still reaching the God. They're preaching the gospel.
purpose that-
People are still getting saved.
Baptized.
Much as we may, we had to clean up this room and get the Christmas tree out of here and all that. It's in the other room, but the Baptists are still preaching the gospel. People might get saved at their Christmas thing. Hallelujah. It's a step off. The Father honors that. So let's give credit where credit is due. Just like Elohim used Saul. He used Balaam. He used Balaam's ass. All of us have been Balaam's asses and may still be at times. So let's if they're not against us, they're for us. So I think it's really important that we preach the truth in love and preach not against them as much as we, maybe not at all, but preach against what they believe that's not biblical, the traditions of men that may not affect the word of Elohim. And I am more, just like Yeshua, I'm more liable to take their leaders to task than them, because their leaders should know better. Yeshua was very gentle with the rank and file religious Jewish people. There's not an example where he got in anybody's face. But when it came to their leaders who should have known better, who were on the take financially, who were hypocrites or whatever, he called them all kinds of names. And you might say, well, that's Yeshua. Well, that's true, that's Yeshua. But so did John the Baptist. And John the Baptist is a picture of preparing the way for Yeshua. And I think there's a John the Baptist generation in our generation that's being raised up to prepare the way for Yeshua.
Absolutely.
And I think we need to speak those of us that feel that we're like John the Baptist, in a spirit at least, we need to be very careful about what we say and be in the spirit. But we need to call a spade and yet be very gentle to the people who are sheep that have been led astray by leaders. But boy, some of these leaders need to be taken to the woodshed. And they need to be, and it's his job, but we're his servants on this earth, and we need to preach the truth and do it in an unmitigated way, and of the Spirit, not in the flesh, and call a spade and preach the truth. So anyway.
And I see parallels here in the end of Samuel, 1 Samuel, with David is like that King Yeshua that's going to come.
Yes.
Saul, whose name meant like Sheol and Saul are essentially the same word.
Hell, yeah.
So it's the death. So once death is overcome, then David can set up his kingdom and begins his rule. Yeah. So there's all this imagery here at the end of Saul's life, where there's a battle at Jezreel, which is Armageddon. And it's in that same valley there. Megiddo is above the valley of Jezreel.
That's right.
So there's all these things happening here, and I think David's sent away to take care of the Amalekites, and Yah says he hates the Amalekites. That was Saul's sin, remember, is he didn't wipe out the Amalekites.
Amalek came from Edom.
Yeah.
Esau.
That's right.
What's that?
Grandson.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so Edom is what that's who desires the high places. Basically, that's the Palestinians today, that Obadiah talks about and Ezekiel talk about, that Yeshua's going to have to destroy on his way into the Promised Land in this day, in our time, or when he comes back. So yeah, there's some good analogies there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and Saul's body is burned, so it's like there's that fiery judgment that comes. Then later they took his bones and buried him, but there's a burning up of Saul's. There's a lot of interesting parallels there. I don't think we have time to get into all that today.
Maybe you need to put that together, and you got some really good ideas there, and make a teaching out of it, Doctor.
Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon his name. He is near, he is near, he is near. Yeshua Hashem Behir Matzov Keravu Yoto Karov Yasov Rasha Darko Yishavim Machshevotav Yashovel Adam Shem Ki Arbe Is Yeshua Hashem Behim Matzov